I'm very happy to welcome a very, I would say, insightful, passionate, and a very driven panel here talking about an important part that we all face in our corporate life and particularly in oil and gas industry about what role can women play and how do we make sure that women have an empowered role in the oil and gas industry. Before we start and getting some insights from my fellow panelists, I want to share some of the stats that I keep hearing about as someone who's driving the diversity agenda in my organization. We all know that the organizations which have got women in their leadership position are able to drive better profitability, more innovation, a very positive culture, and at the same time, ability to access top talent. But when we look at some of the statistics of how our industry, oil and gas industry ranks at it, while at the entry level, there is still a 39% of pool which comes in. But when we look at the leadership level, the leakage is so high that it comes down to about 13%. So there is a huge amount of problem at the entry level, but then as we move up, the retention is a big issue that we have got. And when we look at the STEM industries, the industries which have got technical expertise, engineering expertise, mathematics, oil and gas also doesn't fare too well there. Now, it does sound like a bleak picture though, but I think there are a lot of micro movements, micro changes, and some bold steps that we are taking that are changing how today the situation is. And that's where I would like to start the conversation with all of us here. And before we understand, what is it that we can do and where the change is going to come from, I think it's also important to know why do we have this situation, why the challenges exist. So I would like to ask Mr. Dubey, you've been in the industry, especially, PSU working at refineries and very difficult location. What do you think are the real problems or challenges of why we are in this situation?
I think let me start. This one good beginning we have made, that in an oil and gas environment, we are talking about, women empowerment here. Though it's on day 3, we could have had it on another day maybe. So, that the challenges, you see, if you look at, starts right from the recruitment stage. When we go because we go and recruit in engineering colleges or technical people as well. And when we go for this recruitment, very few women, would give their preference to come to, the oil and gas sector. So that's one big challenge, it faced. But luckily, I think we had a wonderful discussion offline, and we got some insights wherein there is a solution also for that. And for that, we need to sell the oil and gas sector as being somewhat, and glamorize it to some extent, It's like we didn't need any, advertisement or glamour, to ask a woman to join as a pilots, because it has glamour, But oil and gas somewhere, I was wondering why in a refinery we cannot manage, with a woman, and because it's got all the ingredients. You talk about safety, you talk about security, you talk about, having a, family life or a work-life balance, whatever you talk. But somehow it didn't, I think, enter the vision of people who would like to get, recruited into this sector. So it starts from there. And then we were thinking about, positioning at remote locations, especially in oil and gas sectors, the terminals, the depots, they're generally in remote locations. And that's when another challenge comes in, that very few people would like to go there. It's not about women, men as well, but more in case of women. And one of our panelists would say, what is the solution? We will talk of solutions also somewhat, because one solution was for this, that Indian Oil started, some time back, of starting a matrimonial site, within the company, so that we generally see that guys in the same company marry. It's easy to go to a remote place then, as so that was one kind of a solution which all have that, but maybe it has some so this is what I feel.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think you touched upon some very important points that typically there are three issues because of which women tend to drop out. And we call them as three M's: marriage, maternity, mobility. So we talked about marriage and mobility, location being such a big issue. And you also talked about what could be the changes that we can bring about. Pratibha, I think you have done a lot of initiatives, and you know about how we can bring some of the changes around managing these challenges and addressing the three M's. And I know you were talking about something else as well. So why don't you share your insights?
Thank you. Although I find it incredible to be talking to you like this or choosing to talk like this. You can hear me?
Yeah, that's okay.
And I must say that both Raj and Ayush said all of us owe the presence of the audience to both of them. So thank you very much for listening to us and managing what you will hear from here. Okay, so with Shell, we've had a fourth M as well that we defined, and it was menopause. And we said it's not just marriage, mobility, maternity, but there's also an important element that starts to strike, and it's coming earlier and earlier, and it's menopause too. And a lot of organizations, and we've all tried it, right? I say things like mentoring, networking, performance management, succession planning, planned progression. I think we've all done it. We're all much, much ahead in the curve now than we used to be in the past. And yeah, many people talk about India and culture and how it's not as prevalent as it used to be, in the past. Sorry, it's not as bad as it used to be in the past around biases. And there's so many women here that are in the audience, and I'm sure you can all put your hand on your heart and say we've moved miles ahead of where things are. But there's an important point that we all spoke about in the ecosystem, and that's what we do in Shell. We've tried to have an ecosystem above all else. And some of the initiatives, like we have an initiative called Empower, and that's when you go off on maternity and then you actually keep in touch back with the organization, back with a set of buddies. In fact, we've even got people coming back when there's some interesting speakers, something happening in the office. Come along for a lunch. Come back and see us and just visit, make a trip. Shell will pay for it. And we just get on with maintaining the engagement. Similarly, when it comes to menopause, again, one of the conversations we were having was, why is it so bad to talk about it? And because it's so less understood. I can explain everything from my bad mood to my happiness today and in the morning to a crappy mood in the evening to just going through something that even I don't understand. And so, where then are we engaging with men in the team and others to actually come with us along this journey? So, it's just that. I'm not going to belabor the point because I just think we're with a whole bunch of people that understand the whole gamut. And it's engagement, it's honest, open conversations, it's what's possible, what's not possible, flexibility. Ayush, in fact, brought up the one of the more important points, right? In a plant, it's very difficult. I was having a conversation. My son went to do an internship at Tata Coffee. And when he went to do that, he met two interns that were interning. In the first 4 weeks, the boy dropped out, but the girl stayed on. And it was actually how girls now back in the plant, doing the things that they should, in the coffee estates, in the rain, mud, but getting on. So where we talk about empowerment and equality, there does exist a whole point where you're going to have to just unleash it. And I just think it's with engagement and consistent effort. So I'm not going to bore you with statistics. I'm aware of the Raj and Ayush crowd, and I'd say thank you for listening.
That intimidated.
Thank you so much, Pratibha. Varsha, how about you? What has been your experience with some of the programs that your organization has led?
So thank you, and I think it was such an engaging discussion already with the panel ahead of this one, very animated conversation. I think where we are in the journey within BP, particularly in our capability center, we are still starting our journey there. but we have a massive global program and a massive global ambition, which we are trying to mirror in our local business as well. I think for us, it's been recognized. Of course, the gap is huge, particularly in the energy sector and oil and gas. And while, a lot of progress has been made globally, 1 in 5 women hold leadership roles. But when we come closer to India, it's only 8% participation of women in the sector. So we have a huge opportunity, only 600 managerial roles. And I think as we are going into energy transition, we have better ways of finding solutions. We have opportunity to have more perspectives, more diverse solutions for the ecosystem. At BP, we recognize that. One of the first things we said is that we will declare a leadership ambition, right? Because it starts with the tone at the top. And we said in order for us to get to our ambition, net zero ambition, we were serious about our aims. And aim 14 for us is about greater equity. Not just greater equity within, but also externally with our ecosystem. So we set out a target and we said 50% of our top 120 roles globally will be women by 2025. And we are on the journey and we're getting there. So that was the first thing. We set out our gender ambition very clearly. Then we said for the next level leaders, we will put it out there as 50% by 2030 and 40% across the organization. And it started with this ambition, but not just the ambition. We said we need a framework for action, because you can have bold ambition, but if you don't make it into practical steps, it just becomes very difficult to see progress. So our leadership action, framework action is fourfold. One is transparency, right? Because we said if you're not transparent internally and externally on the progress we are making, and we don't acknowledge the gap, we are not going to make progress. So transparency is important. We publish, as many companies do. We measure ourselves, so we give accountability to our employees, to our line managers. And we recognize that culture plays a big role. So it's not just about attracting talent, retaining, mentoring, and growing it, but it's to create a culture where everyone can flourish. And we have very strong and very clear goals on leadership framework, what we expect within our own culture. And it's not just about, so we have all our usual tools that we would have, right? So we have our BRGs, which is our ecosystem, BP Win, our global network. We've got mentoring programs and so on. But I think we take culture also equally seriously. So encourage people to speak up when you spot unconscious bias. And many other such things. So, I know that we've got lots of topics to cover, so I'll take a pause on this one for now. Thank you.
Very, very important points, Varsha, that you touched upon. I think few things that I'm going to, go around and ask the people from whatever you said. I think the word that you used, equity and not equality. The fact is that the gap is so high. For us to become equal, the route is equity. And the route starts from the bottom, which is how do we source, more women into the workforce so that we can create that equity. And I think that's where even the educational institutes do play a big role. And Mr. Gupta, what do you think, what role they can play, given today when we go to engineering colleges, and we were again talking about it, that in a mechanical engineering, out of 60, you get only 2 women candidates. So I know things have changed. I am myself from a 60 out of 60 women, batch. But what's been your experience, and what do you think educational institutes can do differently about it?
Yeah, thank you very much. And before I talk about what the educational institutes can do and what can be done to increase the supply side of women to cater to the oil and gas industry in particular, primarily we are talking of two things in today's discussion. One is increasing the participation of women workforce in oil and gas industry. And secondly, once they are there as a part of the workforce, how do we make sure that their career ladder is smooth and they are getting equal opportunity, equitable opportunities in growing up the ladder. So talking of on the supply side of the problem, where we talk about that we have the intent, we have the systems and processes in place where opportunities can be provided to men and women in the same way as any other employee in the organization. But what we talked about, and we heard other panelists also, that when we go out to recruit, there are very few applicants in at least in the core engineering plant. I am not talking of the services or the HR or finance or marketing roles, where you have a fair good number of women candidates applying for the jobs and getting opportunities also, and they are doing fairly well when they are in the organization. But in the core engineering branches, there is a problem where the intake or their choice of going for a mechanical engineering or engineering branches is too less. And one of the things, again, I will talk of one specific initiative which GAIL as a corporate has taken under our CSR program, where we have a GAIL Utkarsh Center in Varanasi, where we support all 60 students center, where we coach them 30 girl students for medical stream and 30 for engineering stream. And I am happy to share for last 5 years the track record is almost 95 to 98% of them are qualifying the engineering stream and as well as the medical. So last year, out of 30 girl students who appeared for medical NEET, 28 of them qualified the NEET examination, and similarly out of 30 those who appeared for engineering, 27 of them qualified the JEE mains. So this is the, but I think many much so more initiatives are needed by the corporate, by the industry, as well as the educational institutes to bring them to the institute. Once they are there, they are part of the institute, they are able to successfully complete their degrees. The industry is more than welcoming to hire them, take them along in their journey, because the point that we are having a discussion here today and all the big corporates being part of the discussion is a commitment of the industry itself that we are ready to take them. There's no bias, there's no dearth of opportunities for girl students and women to take leading roles. And today we always talk of whether we have success stories to talk about or not. And I can share again, proudly share, sitting here with representing oil and gas PSUs now, we have EIL CMD, who's led by a woman, Mrs. Vartika Shukla. We have directors on board of ONGC, IOCL. I think Rashmi is there, who's going to be next director HR of IOCL. So we have so many success stories out there to emulate and share with the prospective candidates and students out there in the industry, that they have a very bright future ahead, provided they opt for that career and ready to join. There are systems, policies. Now, talking of the second part of the problem, what we are talking, how to make sure that their career journey is smooth and we are able to take care of the 4 challenges, 4 M's we talked about. I believe all the organizations have policies and systems and procedures per se. If the framework or the ecosystem is there, whether we talk of maternity leave, whether we talk of child care leaves, whether we talk of counseling sessions, mentoring sessions, all those things, best of the practices, if it is not there today, tomorrow it's going to be there. We are learning today only among ourselves, we learn so many things, and I'm sure going back to the workplace, we are going to implement one or the other thing, learning from each other. So that is no longer a challenge, that system and process is not in place. They are there. If they are not there, it's only a matter of time that they will be there. What we need to do as an industry, as an academic institution, or as families itself, as parents also, that we encourage, bring them, motivate them to opt and tell them what this industry, what this sector promises them in the future, how can they make their career and living a respectable career, a profitable career for themselves in this industry, is that I believe all of us need to come together as stakeholder. Individually, we may be doing many things, but I believe what is needed, that we need to come together. Industry and academia has to come together and propose these initiatives. rather than industry doing their own bit and academia doing it separately in their own way. The need of the hour is that we come together, collaborate, create many much more initiatives like GAIL Utkarsh to make sure that the students are made aware of the engineering options and how those engineering options can help them advance their career and be successful and be a leader in their own way in their life. I think that is what is needed.
Thank you so much. I think very, very important points that you touched upon. That coming together, is the need of the hour, and the fact that our industry, and particularly, I think all corporates for that matter, are more male-dominated, and still we have these kind of policies that you talk about. I'm myself aware of so many PSU policies which are, much better than some of the corporates that we have today. But and that's where I think men play a very important role. So Ranjit, we talk about men allyship. What role do you think men can play in bringing this equity and this equality to where we want it to be?
Thank you. I think if you look at the leadership, okay, when 95% of the leaders are men, right, the amount of experience that they bring into the table, okay, in terms of the journeys that they had, in terms of the struggles that they've undergone, in terms of the cultures, in terms of the relationship they need to build. See, as employees go through the hierarchy, they start focusing on not only the what, but how to do it better, or how to do it differently. Now, when I talk about men allyship, in fact, when we talk about mentoring programs for women, we not only encourage women to mentor women, but we also encourage a lot of men to mentor women employees. The simple reason being, the kind of pitfalls that the men have gone through, kind of understanding the stakeholder expectations that as men they have compared to anyone else, and for a woman to understand those expectations in terms of how to put up a business case across, how to put across a particular presentation, how do I get my things across, how do I execute a project, what are the kind of detailing that is required. All these things, when they actually put across as an expectation mapping, what I've seen across is basically they get a different perspectives to really chart out their path. That's the first benefit that I've seen as men allyship brings in. Second is, a lot of times we've seen that women leaders have their own mental blocks, either in terms of their SWOT that they have or the opportunities that might exist. A lot of times, a mentor who is a man at a senior position can help plot out the women in terms of both the SWOT possibilities, both the opportunity possibilities, and help overcome the mental blocks that might be there. Third and most important is relationship building. A lot of times, when a man mentor at a senior level provides a stage for the mentee to at all levels. So that particular bias that can actually be reduced. In fact, at Reliance, we make sure that it's not the women folks who go through the entire understanding of what we do to encourage those people, but we do a huge amount of program just to educate the men at various levels in terms of their unconscious biases and how can they enable the entire transition. What we've seen this is you can't take it as only a simple transactional approach. You have to take it as a systems thinking approach about how a person can encourage women employees, women leaders at different parts of life, either as a colleague, either as a supervisor, either as a mentor, or at home, either as a husband. We've seen when we bring in their husbands to work, or their father-in-laws to work, or the mother-in-laws to work, and then actually make them an ally in their career journeys as a bouncing board. We've seen a lot of encouragement. We've seen a lot of retention happening. I'm sure everyone else also has faced it. Also, we've seen that when a mentor has a discussion about either engagement or a progression, is much more fruitful than they having a discussion with another woman employee, because the possibilities actually open up a lot. So those are the kind of things that I could actually bring to the table.
No, very interesting. I think mentorship plays a huge role, and mentorship by someone who's in the business, who's done that, adds a lot of value. And I think this is one important pillar. But the problem that we're looking at, it's kind of also multifold. There are many things that have to kind of come together, and that's where I also believe mentorship being, say, number one. There are also resource groups. Like you said, that women would have that mental block that possibly the problem that they are facing only they can solve. They don't even go and talk about it. And that's also the big question to you. Have you seen any kind of resource groups of some sort of groups that you create that can solve some of this problem again at a micro level, because we have to go step by step.
Yes. Yeah. It's no doubt, that you should have resource groups. But we have, in BPC, we have this junior business councils of, they're not only women councils.
I think you can bring the mic a bit closer.
Hello. Yeah. They have this. We have this junior business councils in BPC, which have a decent proportion of women getting up their problems in. What I would look at problem with an oil and gas. One more big problem in oil and gas sector is when we talk of remote location. Most of the locations are remote. They are manned by one or two people. Especially these days when we are going into heavy outsourcing, a lot of locations are manned by one, maximum 3 or 4 people for that matter. And what happens is, if the resistance I'm talking about, if a woman officer is posted there and she goes in a family way, now the entire, 50% of the job needs to be done by the person who's next. So one has to look at why there is resistance for people in recruiting in these areas. Okay, this is one big reason. Now, the solution, what I suggest on this is, for every 10 women we recruit, we have one redundancy plan, so that when such an issue comes up, because this issue comes up without any warning, we cannot plan for this. Now, this is the planning I would suggest, and that we are going to do this. For every 10 women, we have one woman we invest there. That's an investment in diversity, if we really want to be very serious. Otherwise, this resistance will always be there. Because if I'm a plant manager and a woman officer leaves, I have to bear the brunt. So how this needs to be addressed, that we have one redundancy, and the moment some woman officer goes on a family way, immediately, it's like we congratulate her, or congratulations that you're going, instead of looking at, oh, kya karna hai, So congratulate and send a person, replacement, immediately, and for a temporary, on a temporary basis. So this is possible, and is a possible solution I look at. Others, I think, I'll be. And another thing I liked about, when we're talking about Pratibha, that engaging the middle layer, how to deal with women officers. That is what, it's very important to see what kind of conversations, what kind of unconscious biases, how we deal with, women, and how we, indulge those and involve those middle layer, and that's where, it's, I got this lesson.
Yes, I think we're sharing a lot of insights that we had like almost 1 hour of conversation behind the scenes to see what we all think about it. And that's where, Varsha, coming to you, women also have a role to play. I don't think there's only an external part that will solve for it. We also have actions that we must take when it comes to especially climbing, the leadership level and being seen, where women, the girls today see that, okay, I can be someone like that. So what do you think, some of the things that women can do to come out of the situation, remove the unconscious biases that we deal with?
Oh, I think great question there. My contrarian view is that the responsibility is everyone's. All stakeholders have a role to play in the empowerment and development. But coming to women, and just drawing on my personal journey, starting my career 25 years earlier, there were very few female role models to emulate at the time in business roles. And I struggled to find my own authentic style, because the optionality there was to really, emulate a male leader who had a very different narrative and a set of circumstances. But over time, I was very fortunate to encounter many, many female role models globally and locally, not just within the corporate world, but also outside. So I would say for women, seek out opportunities to network and connect with peers, with leaders, etc. Because one of the things that research tells us is women are not as good as networking, and it is something societal which holds them back to put themselves out there, to have those conversations, to reach out for the support, to reach out for those career conversations. So seek the support, be unapologetic about the progress that women are making, because while we can draw a lot of comfort from the fact that there's progress, I mean, last year we were sitting in an IAW panel, we did not have this dialogue. Today already the dialogue we had has moved leaps and bounds. So I would say for women, be unapologetic, because the ground to cover is huge. And I often see women get into a very defensive mode in terms of how am I going to be judged? You know, how are my colleagues going to receive me? I think all stakeholders have to play a role to make women feel empowered, and women have to feel drawn inner confidence. To unlock that, male allies, I would draw on all male allies, because this is not an HR only conversation. While our HR colleagues provide brilliant platform to support with policies, but I think, you know, line managers, senior sponsors, seek out senior sponsors. So I would just say, to summarize, one is be open to receiving support. Yeah, so reach out to role models, mentors, networks, and be very active. Social media gives us great platforms to reach out globally. Secondly is be unapologetic. I know I'm being a little bold with my own statements here, but be unapologetic, because the ground to cover is huge. And when you have platforms, we must leverage those opportunities to pave the path for others, not just for ourselves. And the third one is do everything you can to build that internal confidence, right? So that's what
I
I would say.
absolutely love being unapologetic. Yes, you have a point to add.
Yeah, building upon what Varsha has said, while I earlier said that we have systems and processes in place, policies in place, but that's not the end. We also have the challenges and the problem. The first thing is to recognize that we have a problem in places. Recognition across the organization and acceptance at all levels that there is a problem which we need to address is the first thing. The moment we are able to accept it as a problem and a challenge, the solutions will follow through. There's no doubt about it. The second thing, in spite of having all the systems and processes in place, this is discussion happening at such a level, one thing which we need to address across the organization or the society as such is what Varsha talked about us, that is the unconscious bias. That unconscious bias is a multi-layered thing, starting from an entry level of what Raj talked about in the recruitment. Whether if I am recruiting that lady or the woman candidate, after 2 years she is going to get married, she is going to go on a maternity leave, how the role will be fulfilled. So at the entry level also I am creating a barrier because of my bias that 2 years or 3 years from now she is going to take leave, so I should not hire. So that is first thing, that challenge, unless we are able to confront that and clear that from the recruitment panel, that this should not be a barrier for you to select or not to select a woman candidate. That selection has to be purely on the basis of performance of the candidate in the interview, irrespective of the gender which is coming from. Because that is the biggest barrier, and that is coming out of that unconscious bias or bias that, because some men can also take leave for long days. It's not just a woman candidate. There are people who are taking study leaves, going for a leave year, and that is being managed in the organization. It's not that we are not handling those challenges. That second thing is coming to the organization, what roles can be offered to women candidates. Again, in terms of offering roles, the general bias will be, okay, in the field hire, technical roles may not be given or a softer roles may be given, in spite of making or asking that employee, giving a choice to the employee. Let that choice be of that employee, what kind of roles they are ready to take, rather than we taking a decision on their behalf. Okay, no, they may not be able to do these kinds of roles, and we offer them the roles. And The result of it is visible after 10 years when they will come back that in past 10 years she has not done a field role, she has not done a shift duty, she has also always been in a technical services or a software role, so she may not be fit for that role. So all those biases keeps on adding layer after layer, and after say 10 years or 15 years down the line of 20 years when it comes to leadership role, we again create a bias in what role can be offered. Again, we were talking of performance versus potential on the basis of what the roles are being offered. But that is the, if I have to talk about one problem which we have to solve together at an organizational level, is to how to address this bias. Because systems, policies, processes, we can have the best of the system in the world being adopted in the organization, but if you are not able to tackle this bias, which is purely a human-centric approach, I think we'll not be able to solve this problem. So this is one thing which we need to put together and consciously address that unconscious bias through systems and processes, training programs, and whatever we need to do is something I believe that is what we need to do.
There's a definite shift actually, Ayush, if you look at in the oil and gas sector. You see, even in the refineries which were supposed to be a male fiefdom, the women are coming.
Yeah, John.
Where I have an issue is whether they are seen as a role model. That is the issue. Otherwise, you see, even Indian Oil, you're a director refinery. I mean, this is a male bastion for being, I mean, how many centuries maybe? Now she is running the show in the biggest refiners of the country. So, change is happening. The point is, can we glamorize this?
And I think that's where representation matters.
Yeah, so that people would, the woman would like to come and say, I want to get into the refinery, that kind of a thing. I want to be a refinery woman, that kind. Yeah.
And I think the way the sector is also transitioning, we are going from very heavy industrial engineering led kind of industry where you had to be at the site or you are in a softer non-business role. With the energy transition, I think there is more opportunity opening up, and if we look at some of the statistics, that's where I think the shift of women playing a larger role is happening. So Pratibha, what's your view? What have you seen? Can energy transition be also a transition for more women, empowerment and women representation in the sector?
Oh, thank you. I guess the energy transition, and especially in a very simple example that I see in Shell, a lot of the things with the energy transition are becoming remote. And India, of course, is land for offshoring, whether it is not just IT and finance, but we are also offshoring a lot of technical assets management, which just means that if you have an asset in Rijswijk or in Moldijk or in, those are all names in Dutch, by the way, that is in the Netherlands, if you did not recognize that. So if you're thinking about, just visualizing what's happening in Moldijk, in one of our refineries, and how do you sort of bring home predictive maintenance in Moldijk, that is actually happening from Chennai. And that for us, in terms of the next step towards decarbonization, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, how do we then sort of make blueprints and manage the next step? So much of that work is coming to spaces where there is skill, where the hybrid nature of work is actually adding to helping more women stay and be retained. Plus just the upskilling, right? So if I combine what Ayush said, working with academia on these new generation skills, what Varsha said around helping women themselves sort of look at new avenues and new spaces to be able to upskill themselves as an opportunity. And then you come back into what Raj also said about glamorizing things. It is glamour in terms of working at cutting edge, new age spaces. You just have an entire mix that's now ready like never before, aided by COVID, which actually started the hybrid conversations. And now people don't want to come back to work, but let's not talk about that. We'll just talk about the ones that do come back and how the entire ecosystem is actually helping change in terms of new avenues that are possible. So I just wanted to get very specific and explain that one example, and here you go. I had one more point to make on how can women help themselves. I was itching to make that point. And that is to not be in competition with ourselves. And I think that is just so important, because I often find, as I was having these conversations in the Women's Network in Shell the other day, that most of the times I've hated somebody is another woman growing up in a career and just being honest about it, right? I've just tended to judge in the performance space another successful woman more harshly than a successful man. And just how many times could I have just turned that around to be able to use that for allyship or mentoring, rather than take that step back and say, no, I'm going to another man to get mentored. It happened when I was younger. Now, of course, people need to sort of see the different side of life and things, but I thought that was just a very important point, to be able to also not play to your own biases when fighting a bias for yourself.
It takes a lot of effort to actually first identify that what we believe as a normal nature is actually a bias, which has been existing for multi-generations. So, and I think the new generation, at least as far as I have seen, doing a lot of recruitment from, B schools, I think the new generation is very different, They are not okay with the biases that we have carried, we have been okay with. They are seeing things very differently. And what is your view about Ranjit? Particularly, given Gen Z and millennial are going to be in the workforce and practically calling us dinosaurs very soon. So what do you think? How is that pool responding to this, and women of that pool responding to some of this?
I think, first of all, we need to understand the way they think. Compared to the earlier generations who used to work to live, they used to live to work. Now, the new generation is, they would work only to live, but then they also have other aspects of their life. And I think that's a major shift that actually we need to understand when we are looking at these people and how they approach their own life, how they approach knowledge. See, these generations that are coming in, they are actually coming up with a lot of creative perspective. They don't go with processes. They are coming with a lot of depth of knowledge because the knowledge is available on their fingertip. And also they want challenges. Now, these three things are the ones which drive them. So, and we are looking at the new generations or women in new generations, either ways, right? If you keep these three things apart, compared when we are actually inviting these people to our organizations. So when at Reliance, we looked at these as a set of people where we need to look at them as a holistically and throughout their life cycles. A lot of these people are coming to us right now for either PhDs or MTechs, late 20s, early 30s. And when we look at them, kind of projects that they want to get involved, they don't want to get involved in the routine work that is there. They want some purpose. If they are doing something, maybe they can't relate directly to the vision of the company, but can they relate to a project that is happening, and then they come back and they self-loop with it. So first of all, what we do is we got a model which is called as 5 E's, which is we educate them on kind of projects that are happening, kind of innovation that is happening, so that they can go and participate in those projects where they can find some work which is exciting them. So that's something that is a closed loop that can happen. Second, we also make sure that we encourage them in participating in these groups. And that is both internal as well as external, because in case you have to participate, you have to also put in extra hours. So we also go back and educate the external people. For example, we just ran a campaign with some of the engineering colleges where we had an immersion of the third year and fourth year engineering colleges students in our refineries, also in some of the projects that we are doing it. Let them come and work with us for about a quarter or so, work with us on the weekends, but that's a later thing. Let them see how exciting it is. And especially when we are going through a transition, we are going from a old energy to a new energy setup where we are looking at so many projects happening across. And that's where the younger generation are finding interest in the engineering sector. So typically, a lot of these people used to have only two goals. One is either to go into IT sector because that's comfortable, or to go abroad and do their masters or MBA. So you have to create that enough pull that there is engineering or the old age manufacturing also is as exciting as they can actually come here and create a career. Then we used to make sure that the enablement has to happen, and in terms of either infrastructures or the policies or processes that were there, and make sure that we capture the experiences. See, compared to the normal early generations where the feedback can happen after 6 months or 1 year, because they are all so much on social network, they check their post how much view they have in 24 hours, right? That's the kind of feedback that they want. Number of likes that they get in an instant. So they need that feedback. They also would like to give a feedback instantly. So we need to create processes which actually listen to them very frequently compared to a longer term. And that's the kind of experience that we had. So we created all these things and finally we are measuring it. And that's something that we try to put it up. It's still work in progress, but hopefully that's somewhere we should be able to get a lot of these millennials and Gen Zs come to us and stick with them. I think that's.
I think we also got our real-time feedback that our time is up. So thank you so much, everyone. I started with a very, muted note that we haven't been doing great. But good part is that is all historical data. I think what I've learned from all of you and both on-stage and backstage conversation, there is true intent, there are true actions, there are initiatives, and most importantly, I think the awareness that we need to change this. So thanks a lot, everyone, for what you discussed here, and more importantly, what you're doing backstage in your organizations to change what the stats show today. So thanks a lot, everyone.
If I can just
Thank you.
add one more thing,
Yeah.
because that panel should not end with just discussions, and there should always be a way forward. And if on behalf of the entire panel members, I can propose that going forward, maybe all of us can volunteer, and we are talking of mentoring. We'll be more than happy to mentor as a group, not as an individual, as a group. We can stay together and mentor any prospective candidates, male or female, whosoever is, who want to pursue their career in oil and gas industry. So if we can create that platform, and 6 of us to start with, and any other volunteers who want to join.
Now there is real glamour.
Wonderful. No, that's amazing. I mean, being able to do a debate and take a real action on ground after that, thank you so much for that. I mean, I'm up for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
You were saying something?
Thank you.